This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello everyone and welcome to Shipwrecked and Comatose, the Red Dwarf podcast here on the We Made This podcast network. My name is Kurt North and I am now fully out of stasis. I've fully thawed out after last week's show. And this week we are going to be covering season 6, episode 2, which is Legend. Joining me, as always, is Mark Adams. Mark, how are you?
Hello, I'm good. I'm very excited about this episode. It's a favourite of mine, but I guess I'm excited about every episode of Series 6.
You're just going to say that every episode.
Series 6, man. Love this shit.
Wait till we get to Gunman. That's all I'll say.
I won't be able to contain myself.
Absolutely not. Joining us as well is the recurring guest as of last week, Carl Bryan. Carl, how are things?
Very good, Kurt. I'm very happy to be here as part of this gestalt with you and Mark.
It's going to be an interesting gestalt if we've got me, Mark, and you.
And Pasha.
And Pasha.
Yeah, but that's my cat for people who don't know. And she's been interfering in the recording quite frequently, but hopefully that will have been edited out. Maybe.
Well, we're close. It's close to the proper group, though, isn't it? There's 4 of us. There's a cat.
Yeah.
And there's 3 of us. There's only who's the robot in the
true.
joke.
Well.
Anyway, we are here to talk about season 6. As last week, I will just mention about the Laredo GoFundMe page, which we've going to be shouting out every single week for this for the next 6 weeks. As people may be aware, at the end of November, they had a huge fire on the set, which is on the Gunman the Apocalypse set, which we'll be covering in a couple of weeks. So in the link down in our notes there, wherever you find this podcast, there is an option to help with that and donate whatever you can for them to try and raise that money. They have been building the set back up, and it's probably an interesting thing to go on their Facebook page, actually, to see how they're getting on. So they are starting to rebuild that. So anything you can give, please do so, because it is a piece of Red Dwarf history, and it'd be sad to see it not reach its target.
Also, it looks like a fun, good time out as well, or once it's been rebuilt.
Yeah. I mean, it's not open to the public, unfortunately. You know, if we do a special from there, that's working. That's not a public event.
True.
We are working.
Riviera Adams.
Oh, that's going to be a fun episode, isn't it?
Next week, isn't it?
That's going to be a fun Monday night for us before we air it. So we're going to lovely fun Monday nights. But yeah, before we get there, though, we are talking about Legion, whatever you want to call it, the Gestalt entity. It was
Legion. They literally call him nothing but Legion in the episode.
No. Rimmer calls him Legend.
Oh, he does. When he's trying to be intelligent, doesn't he? All right.
We're talking about Legion. Directed by Andy D'Emoni and written by Rob Grant and Doug Naylor. The original air date was the 14th of October, 1993. So, episode 2, guys, we start off with them still trying to find Red Dwarf. That's what I was saying about the continuation here. We start off with Rimmer and Crichton in the kitchen area, like we discussed last week. There's 2 or 3 sets here that have been built. Crichton basically says we're still lagging behind Red Dwarf, and they're almost 24 hours behind now. But then you talked about these sneezes on the screen. Again, this is kind of like one of those episodes that it's still retelling the story as such, and it's giving that list of backstory. So what did you make to the beginning of this episode, Mark?
Well, I definitely thought they've got a really nice set here. They're going to use it quite a lot. And that's clearly what they were planning with this kitchen. They made a real effort, and the kitchen's cool. And doesn't it continue into Series 7 as well? Isn't there like a lot of scenes with Kachansky and Crichton in the kitchen as well?
They have that whole scene with the, is it the mayonnaise in the fridge?
Yeah.
They keep going on about.
Yeah, and the ongoing gag about pineapple chunks in your cottage cheese and stuff, don't they? But I think it's a lot of fun. And Crichton in the kitchen kind of gives him almost like his equivalent of the bunks, because he's always likely to be in there.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So that's a new deal for the Crichton character as well, which is cool.
It's pattered. It's scattered through the actual episode. This where he says about sneezing, and they thought there was an army coming to get them, and it was just one of the sneezes, which I thought was really good. And then the Space Weevil joke with, overall, with this joke that we've getting the likes of the lettuce on the side. That, well, what are we eating then? Well, Space Weevil, which in itself was quite good. And the Space Weevils were eating the corn, so at least the corn fed. So all of that kind of like is, again, like I said last week, it's kind of like the having longer conversations. It's not as much as a one gag thing. It's kind of like a build up to a gag. With this one, for example, it's a build up until we get Lister actually eating the Space Weevil, which I thought was another nice little segue into the actual eating area as well.
I love how the Space Weevil looks. It looks like it's a decent sized meal. It's
about Poussin sized, isn't it?
Yeah, it's and again, credit to the model department. You look at it and go, I can imagine that scuttling around. Yeah, but the fact that Crichton's big idea is, well, that's eating all the food. Let's eat that. I really like that. And the fun thing is, he doesn't have to eat it, and neither does Rimmer.
No. The thing that I really like about the Space Weevil thing is that it's such a deep cut and so well remembered that the gag continues on to Can't Smeg, Won't Smeg, which I think is a really fun thing that they actually carried that gag on, because it was clearly a popular one.
Yeah. And I think, as I say, it's the whole build-up. We get the swap out where, Lister does this a few times by the table, doesn't he, where he goes, what's this? Carrots? And he does this a few times over the course of this episode where it's like, he's saying something and it's not it's subverting what you're going to think he's going to say, which I found was really good. I mean, take the cockpit scene next where he's really making Cat as gullible as physically possible. It's just like, what I particularly like at the beginning was just, again, it plays on Lister. And it's the same as what happened last week. So it's kind of re-emphasizing that. We talked about last week about it being, it's kind of like diverting and doing a very soft reboot in some ways. And this again's kind of like, it's, look at Lister's habits. He's not very clean when he's in the cockpit. He's leaving stuff there. Things are on the counter. And Cat being the pristine person that he is getting a bit annoyed by this, and rightly so. But the way that Cat and Lister play together, Carl, here is just, it's a lovely, again, elongated scene.
It is, and it almost has elements. The fact it's a shift change, it almost brings in that element of a workplace comedy about it. In that, you mess with your workmates, and maybe this is just the way that. Holly's not there anymore to keep Lister sane, so Lister's taking it into his own hands by messing with the cat, playing with the cat, which is what you do with your cat. Is you play with the cat, and in this case, he's just winding up the cat because, Mark is an unashamed cat lover, and I bet at some point Mark's done a laser pen to make Pasha run around or stuff like that.
My cat's petrified of laser pens.
Really?
I scared the shit out of her when I tried it.
Yeah.
But she does like a dangly fish on a stick.
Yeah, so you're doing something where you dangle in front of them to make them go like, oh, 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 oh. And Lister's done that with the cat by telling him there's an asteroid shaped like a dancing moose. So there's the parallels there of, he's on his own in deep space, but he's still got a cat. And I like that in that... the trimming my verrucas thing is gross, but
they seem to be really doubling down on the grossness of Lister in this season so far.
Yeah.
They do really push that.
What I think I've seen here is that the crew are continuing with the ongoing thing where they become more equal in their boys from the dwarfness, their friendsness, the fact that they go from all winding up Rimmer to kind of almost equally winding up each other. And this is progress with that, where he's winding up the cat by taking the piss because he's gullible.
Yeah, I mean, the thing we've not covered yet, we didn't really cover it much in the last episode, is Rimmer is nowhere near as much of a shit as he was in previous episodes. Previous
he's not.
Even in the first one, when Rimmer, Lister's outside with the sirens, Rimmer's shouting at him to get back inside. And I don't think that's fully just from a selfish thing, because if it was from a selfish thing, he'd have just left him out there.
Mm.
But and on this, he's, he, like you say, he takes the mick out of all of them in various points, and he, rather than it just being him picking on other people, and it is probably from that like change of circumstances, everybody's all together in a very small space, so they kind of have to get along. And and it's kind of softened everybody's views towards each other, although Lister's still quite gross.
We've got the thing with the raw carrot as well, something that it comes in just after Cat and Lister. This is when he gets the food, is when he's eating the raw carrot, is the conversation about the good memory quiz. Well, sir, you did that last week, sir.
Don't you remember? A classic, isn't it?
Yeah. No one else spells Thursday with an F.
Yeah.
It's just, like I said, there seems to be in this series a lot more quick little gags, but they work well in relations to the characters. They've realised that they can't go all over the ship as much as they could, so now they've kind of got to double up on it. It's got to be funny because we can't go that far unless we're going to, like in this episode, a certain place.
But the little gags are always interspersed with the longer gag. It's like it's not like it's the little gags there just for the sake of it. It's actually part of the longer run of the writing. That's why I think that so far the 2 episodes that we've watched, the writing is really, really strong. They come back to things that they'll say. Like last week, we were talking about that last week. We have something at the beginning, with Lister's amnesia and how that kind of factors in later on with the guitar playing and things. So they are really kind of pushing this difference of like, I mean, they've always done it. This is not me having to go at the previous seasons because they've done this, but they are focusing on that for exactly that reason. They say, Carl, because they are in a, they are in a situation comedy now. They're not, they don't have, they do go out over places. We don't have Red Dwarf to walk on and go, oh, right, well, we're just going to go on the observation deck now, or we'll go to this area or go to that area. It has to be one of 4 or off the ship itself. We mentioned it. We have to come to it. It is here. It's been arriving. I've been waiting 2 and a bit years for this. And this is the moment. This is the moment. We are in the cockpit. Now, what I will say, and it's not a continuity error, is do you think that Rimmer has been pushing for this bulb for ever since he got reinstalled last episode? Because the bulb is not there in Starbug last episode.
Didn't think of that.
I've checked.
Yeah.
So in my canon, my head canon, he's been just because he's got the Space Corps directives now. He's got the way he wants. He says, "Look, we need to run the ship the way it's meant to be run. We need an emergency system. We need a blue alert. We need a red alert. We need this." And they've given him the actual alarm system and put it into place for him. And now he's in the cockpit and he's able to use it. That's the way I view it.
Yeah. I just think it's not one of my favourite gags from the show, but I do think it's the most famous gag across the entire run of Red Dwarf. Do you agree with that?
It's up there. It's definitely up there. Yeah. I'm surprised they never made a T-shirt of it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would have thought they would have done that. I think what makes this gag for me is it's the Star Trek gag, basically. It's the, go to yellow alert, go to red alert. So that's your natural thing. It's like, okay, we're going to do that. It's also the way that you were talking about Rimmer not being it's been slightly different here. He's definitely more along the lines of he's still remembering the fact that he wants to go by the book. Yes, he misquotes the book all the time now, which is fascinating. But it's like when they're saying go to Blue Alert, and the fact that Liz has gone, what for? There's no one to alert. We're here. There's only 4 of us. You know what I mean? And the fact that he does quote the Space Code directives, and I'm just wondering, would you break that rule, Mark? You know, basically 34124 is no officer with false teeth should attempt oral sex in zero gravity.
I'd absolutely have a go if I was. Yeah,
if you're in
totally
zero gravity
would.
and had false teeth.
I mean, I'm hoping that I never have either of those things in my life, I'll be honest with you. But I'd still want to have sex.
Definitely.
I refuse to believe, Mark Adams, that if you were in zero gravity, you would not turn around to someone and go, quick, try and nosh me off.
I'm not denying that at all. It would be an experience. It's not much fun in underwater. I did have a go at that. Didn't work.
Thing is, though, if the only way you can do it at the moment, apart from going into space, are those shuttles where you go up and you're weightless for about 7 minutes. So you'd probably be quite disappointed.
What? Do you think that's what Richard Branson and Elon Musk did?
Well, you know, if you've seen what Jeff Bezos' version was, it, you know, that was
It looked like a massive dick.
It did. It did. Yep.
Yeah. I did get message during that because William Shatner's going into space. Then I got the sent the thing. It was like, I think it was Ajax. Was just like, it's like a massive penis. I was quite happy for William Shatner though to go into space.
William Shatner.
It felt right of all the people to send in.
Yeah.
What was he, 90?
Yep, oldest man in space. Yeah. Anyway,
It's going to take some beating as well. 90, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, does he have false teeth? Maybe.
Possibly.
Maybe.
Oh shit! Maybe.
You never know. But yeah, I think for me, you're saying about is it the most memorable gag? For me, it is, but that's because, you know, it's one of my favorite gags of the show's run at all, and it definitely for me has that extra emphasis on the Star Trek stuff. So the fact it is a Star Trek gag itself is really good. And just the way that it's played, because again, it goes back to this long storytelling of, like, you know, we get the blue alert, we get Lisa saying, you know, there's no one to alert, we're all here. You know, everyone's on the toes, everyone knows what's happening. And then we come off that story, you know, we actually come off it completely, go on to something else. And it's the fact that we recall it like a minute later. He says, hey, and it's the delivery. I think Crichton, it's probably the reason why I think Crichton's my favourite character, because smug mode last week, you know, I find I'm almost annoyed. Those lines are just the way he delivers those lines, and this one is just perfect, because it's just the way he looks at him and just goes, are you really quite sure, sir? It does mean changing the bulb.
I like it because the intonation of it is, he will do it, but he just wants to make sure first that we're doing it. It's It seems to be. It's a very British sitcom joke, I think.
Yeah.
I think in America it wouldn't have landed, or if it was done if, like, say, Red Dwarf USA was going to Series 6, I don't think it would have. If they'd done that gag, it would have just gone, but over here, with the way it was done, it landed hard.
No, because I think it's also multi-layered because of the things that we've just said. The other layer is that we've talked about the way that Red Dwarf can sometimes do stuff. So last week was the straw. You know, it was the siren straw. The fact that it's just ridiculous. It's the Doctor Who thing, isn't it? Really, you know, there's ridiculous things that happen, and we just, as a British show, we just take it on board like that. You know, famous examples is the action man coming out when Rimmer gets taken out of the ship and has to come walking back. You know, it's clearly a little action figure, but that's what makes it funny. The sets falling apart make it funny. So the other layer on this for me is that the change in the bulb is also, like, it's so stupid because, you know, in the future you should just be able to go to yellow alert or red alert and it just happen. But it's just the very nature that yeah, we need to change the bulb. Or put the new slide in. So it's got multiple layers for me, and I think that's why it works so well for me personally.
Yeah.
I'd never thought of it as a dig at their shonky sets, but I think it is a bit of an in-joke. I think you're right.
Yeah. I've always taken it as that. And more so than the Star Trek references, I've always taken it as like, you know, we are a real piece of work. Does he not say that? Or is that on another episode? When I think Lister says it, doesn't he? He says, we're a real ragtag
Mickey Mouse,
kind of thing.
We ain't even Betty Boo.
Yeah, that line. So it's stuff like that. It's self-deprecation, isn't it? Basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the reason why it works so well. We get to evasive action because in the thing we believe there's some sort of missile coming towards them, and we find out that it is actually some sort of tractor beam which takes them towards a shopping centre. Oh no, sorry, a space station. At which point we see a character we come to know as Legion. So what do you make of Legion as a concept, Carl?
The actual idea behind what he is and what he revealed to be, I think, is absolutely brilliant. The execution of what he looks like could have been done better. I love the mask with the tube and everything, but the bodysuit's not. Because I think it's the actual actor who does the voice is in the suit.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah,
but he doesn't need to be.
No. Well, I've got some from, as I've mentioned before, the book Stasis Leak, and I'll read this verbatim. So behind the scenes, Nigel Williams' smooth and assured voice gives Legion a sense of calm and control. But although he sounded good, his costume did not serve him well. Time and budget constraints meant costume designer Howard Burden hadn't been able to do what he wanted to do and had to compromise. The idea of having a coloured liquid circulating tubes around his body was jettisoned in favour of a cheaper, less effective, all-in-one bodysuit with a moulded mask and breastplate. The suit was made to zip up at the back, but when the actor arrived on location for his first day of shooting, the costume was too small. The zip broke and he had to be sewn into it.
Wow.
So yes, it was meant to have like sort of like antifreeze tubes and all kinds going around it, but they ended up in just a green.
Just from working on stuff myself, if I looked at that and gone, right, I'd have probably turned around and gone, keep the mask, get him a suit. We'll just put him in a suit, or we'll put him in some kind of tunic, anything but because I'm guessing, like you say, they were up against it, and that's why that suit ended up where. When you said it didn't turn out the way it meant to, I thought you were going to say it was that suit, but it had more plates added to it, like down the legs and on the arms and stuff, to make it look a bit more cyborg-like. But yeah, when you said the tubing idea would have been great, although I can imagine they considered for a minute like Christmas lights or something just around him. But
it's just a real shame, isn't it? Because, like you say, the mask is great, and the guy playing it, he's a bit squidgy, isn't he? And it looks like a squidgy man in a tight-fitting lycra outfit thing, and that's not really robotic or gestalt or any. It doesn't really fit what Legion is, which is a shame. And also, did you notice that at various points the suit was so falling apart that tubes were attached, unattached, and not just like the mouthpiece that he pulls out, but the one on the top of his head. In one cut, it's into the mask, and the next one, it's poking out the top of the mask. And there's loads of stuff like that where the tubes have just attached, and it's like, this is really crap. Yeah. And then when you think about what they achieved with the kitchen and the sirens and the fingernails and all the stuff from the last episode, this one shonky thing is a real shame.
Yeah, I think that probably goes to the fact of the time constraints that they were under as well, doesn't it? I mean, the actual scene itself, when I said about the supermarket thing or the shopping centre, it's actually Marco Polo House in London, apparently. But so that was an on-site thing. So you can imagine the continuity being that they were on that set for half a day, whatever it may be, and then the other stuff was done at a later date or the same day or whatever. I think he was saying there were quite long days. The actor was saying, Nigel Williams. So yeah, considering the constraints they're under, I don't give it that much pushing really, because I think it's just the case of like it's the way things were.
Everything about that shot looks all right, apart from the physical lift itself.
Yeah, it's like it is just a lift, which, you know, I mean, I would just say praising it for self-deprecation, but you know, as I say, sometimes it's like I don't know if that almost took me out of it a little bit. So what do you think to the Gestalt kind of thing then? Because this is what I was saying last week about also the writing is really good in this episode, because there's moments when like Crichton's doing a little check on him and he says, you know, he's got organic but part mechanical, and there's little clues to what he is in the episode, because the part mechanical is obviously Crichton and that he's been developed himself. So but what did you think to the idea of this Gestalt entity?
Well, they give you a massive clue at the start, don't they? Where they arrive and literally he forms out of molecules, doesn't he? And that effect's actually really nicely done. But the suit is awful. I really like the idea. I think it almost could have been something they could have explored, where which personality is strongest and how does that affect the Gestalt entity. There's lots you could do with this as a pure science fiction concept. They were never going to do it in Red Dwarf because they'd got 25 minutes and they needed the lulls. But as a concept, I think it's ace, and it's something that I don't know any sci-fi that really explores that.
I wonder if some science fiction shows would have stolen the idea if it hadn't come from Red Dwarf.
Maybe.
And it's like, oh, we could do that, but then it's like, oh, I can't really nick it off them because they're a science sitcom, a sci-fi sitcom, and you know, I can imagine it's just kind of like, oh, we can't not stoop to the level of like we can't steal an idea from them. We're science fiction writers, damn it. We're on Next Generation. We can't possibly steal from Red Dwarf. The fans will go apeshit. But it's definitely something, especially some of these shows with bigger budgets like Next Generation or something like that, they could have done very easily, and it would have been a very interesting thing to do.
Just something that I've skimmed over. I just want to jump back a little bit when they open the hailing frequencies, and this is what I was saying about last week, that they all seem to have their own sections. So you've got Rimmer says to Lister, "Can you open communication?" And we get this conversation where Rimmer starts talking about this is the Jupiter Managed Transport Vehicle Star Bug. He never talks. In this episode, he seems to talk differently to everything he's done in the past. But then when he switches it, it's like, we surrender, totally without any condition. It's fine. Sorry, bye, sorry. But then there's also the bit when he's talking about broadcasting all known frequencies, including Welsh.
That's a dig.
That's a very big dig, isn't it?
It's naughty, that is.
I mean, in a lot of 90s and probably 80s sitcoms, the Welsh were a bit of a punchline. Yeah. I mean, I thought with him doing the macho voice when he was doing the communications was him trying to be more Ace. Yeah, with the tone in his voice, it did feel like he was... The Ace bit of him was coming out. But yeah, then it completely goes away from... This is the one where he has the panic attack under the scanner table, isn't it? He delivers the speech of, I believe over all my generations I've been a fierce warrior who happens to be, in this incarnation, an abject coward.
Oh, yes. So, yeah, no, that's in this episode, because he mentions General George S. Patton. Do you know anything about George S. Patton?
I know there's a very iconic shot of the film Patton where he stood in front of the giant flag, but not of the actual man himself. No,
He claimed to have seen combat many times before in previous lives. Which he believed he was a Roman legionnaire, a part of the 14th century battle of. It was a 14th century army of John the Blind of Bohemia. Before that, in 1943 invasion of Sicily, British General Harold Alexander told Patton, "You know, George, you would have made a great marshal for Napoleon if you had lived in the 19th century," of which he replied, "But I did." So he actually physically believed it. And there's books on him, apparently, that actually says that he actually believes it. He's a really interesting character, though, because part of me thinks this might have formed something in the Gunman of the Apocalypse. He carried a pair of pistols with ivory handles.
Huh.
Patton fired a new ivory-handled Colt 45 in a deadly Mexican shootout. But at this battle, he decided to carry a secondary ivory-handled handgun for added firepower. The flamboyant pistols contained hand-carved initials and became his trademark. So I'm wondering if that's in their head, because they talk about General Patton here, and then they move into that. He's earned Purple Hat things for World War One. He got shot in the leg and continued on, didn't go to hospital for a while. He designed his own sword. And he survived to he was 60 years old, where he died from injuries from a freak car accident. So he's had a really interesting life and probably lives. So.
Well, he thought he'd had interesting lives, at least.
Absolutely. And another thing that's mentioned in that conversation as well, and it's a nice little touch on Rimmer, that Rimmer talks about Io, what on Io's going on, rather than what on Earth is going on, because he's obviously from Io, which I thought was a nice little touch.
There we go. We're talking here about the continuity thing again. Yeah.
We are.
Do you know what else gets referenced in that scene?
Well,
I'd really like some A-line flares with pockets in the knees.
I've got it highlighted, and I've got ask Mark.
I would absolutely wear a pair of A-line flares with pockets in the knees. But I like comfort, and I could pull off A-line flares with pockets in the knees.
And the other thing, he mentions the being deader than Corduroy, if that's this episode. Corduroy's back.
Rude. I was very cross. Yeah. Corduroy's fabulous. I won't have a bad word said about Corduroy. I've gone off the cat a bit for that.
Oh, bit of sour taste in them off there, Mark.
I know.
What's also mentioned when they're actually on the space station, but he's listened to some of the physicists involved: Heidegger, Davro, Holder, and Quayle. So I think Davro is an allusion to Bobby Davro, and Quayle is he's come up. He came up in the X-Files in season 7, strangely enough. Quayle is the guy who misspelled potato during the presidential race. There was like a spelling bee that apparently happened, and it was spelled potato with an E. But apparently it's been one of those things, is like, it's not really his fault to a degree, because it was on the card he was reading. So it was the school that got it wrong, but he took the total fall for it because he was the one reading it off the card and said it was wrong. It's spelled P-O-T-O-P-O-T-A-T-O-E rather than O.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting that they used those.
Apparently Holder is reference to Noddy Holder, but that could just be somebody adding something to Wikipedia about it. But from what I read was the Davro and Quayle, but Holder is supposed to be reference to Noddy Holder.
Brilliant.
Oh, fantastic.
When I first watched it as a kid, I actually thought he said Davros, and I thought it was a reference to the Daleks, but it is Davro. It's not Davros, unfortunately.
I think he says
it would have been good to have Davros, wouldn't it?
Yeah, he says it quick enough that I don't think people noticed Davro as much as Quayle.
I'm not sure what year that was actually done, or what year that was when that happened. It was, but as I say, it was mentioned on season 7 of the X-Files, so it must have been in the 90s when it was actually, or late 80s maybe. You mentioned about continuation. We have an appendix.
It's so weird. It's so weird that they get these really nice little deep cut Easter egg nods that reward long-term fans. And then something like that. And they've done it twice in as many episodes. I don't care because it's funny as fuck, but it is odd that they seem to really kind of care at one point and then forget about something quite significant.
It's also interesting that they keep returning the stuff. For me, it's like almost the reverse of it. It's like they seem to have an obsession with certain things. So if you think about Red Dwarf as a whole, they have an obsession with like putting a country or a cat or an area in front of stuff. Last week was an Albanian shepherd, wasn't it? So it seems like it's not the alliteration, but it's kind of like the cadence of the joke. You know, they have to put like a Bulgarian such and such or an Albanian thing.
Bulgarian pin-up was the other one, wasn't it?
Yeah. So they have to put these things in.
Even a diuretic camel.
Yeah. Well, you know,
it's quite an image, diuretic camel, isn't it?
Well, what's quite an image is a diuretic dinosaur, but we'll talk about that in a couple of seasons' time. But yeah, they do seem to have this thing with like where they have to add like or come back to that as a style. Again, the appendix thing seems to be a recurring thing they keep going back to. It's almost like a well that they're keen to go back to. Like you say, if they and we don't necessarily get stuck on it, we just mention it, don't we? But it is. I just find it interesting more from a thought process about why they keep going back to it. Is it that they completely forget? Is it that they don't really care and they're just doing it for the gag? Or, you know, is it a bit in between? It's really interesting.
I think they just forgot, to be honest with you.
Although in the thanks for the memory when Rimmer says, that's why I had my appendix out twice. Maybe he doesn't... Maybe he never had his appendix out, but he's remembering Lister having his removed twice.
Maybe people in the future have got two appendixes.
Maybe they've had appendix transplant.
That's true.
Maybe he had one.
I mean, maybe they found out what the appendix actually does, and they realise it's quite vital for a enlightened, 3 million year human being.
Yeah, that's it. The appendix is great for space travel.
Maybe.
Yeah. Stops space sickness.
That could well be. We'll see if the appendix reappears in the future. Yeah, so then we see the artworks, and Crichton starts to understand, and he's got a connoisseur chip. And again, going back to reoccurring jokes, this one is just because I look like Herman Munster's stuntman. Doesn't mean I can't appreciate
that. Herman Munster's stuntman, up until relatively recently, was something that people wouldn't get. But hasn't there been like a new Munsters recently?
Rob Zombie's making one now.
Right.
Oh, right. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But the head jokes are brilliant. I think Amusing Ice Cube was in the last episode as well, wasn't it? And it's just wonderful. And
we come to a really, really important story element for the show moving forward. Rimmer, obviously, now is equipped with a hard light drive. He is can feel pleasure and pain responses remain the same, but he can't come to any harm. Now, how terrifying would that be? It's played for laughs in this episode, but the fact that you can still feel it, but yet you can have a concrete or metal plate, a metal tube hit against your head, and that would hurt. That would really hurt.
And the torture aspect, you could potentially be tortured forever, more so than someone who has like a finite number of fingernails to remove, It's actually quite sinister. Obviously, the pleasure bit's quite nice, but the pain is not. Again, continuity, puncture repair kit on standby because of his blow-up doll. That gag is great new, but has just got that little bit of extra spice for people who are a big fan of it.
Yeah.
Because, you remember that he did have a blow-up doll that Lister nicked. That's series 2, I think.
I like the gag of the fact that Legion pulls out ream upon ream upon ream of cable, and then he just puts in a tiny chip. Yeah, I liked just the silly physical, TARDISness of the Rimmer's light bee. He literally has to go, dink.
But again, talking about his voice, Nigel Williams' voice, the way he goes, yes, of course. So basic. Yeah, it's literally like like it's so condescending of like, I'm below this, but look at this primitive person.
Well, how different is that to if you've got an 80s mobile phone? Do you remember the ones in the suitcase with an actual receiver?
Yeah.
And all that gubbins that you needed just to make a phone call compared to a modern phone. So I think the joke is it's almost like looking at a historical thing that is way, way out. Didn't Star Trek do it in the whales? Didn't Bones just randomly cure someone's cancer with like an injection or something like that?
He brought somebody out of a coma, I think, or something like that.
They gave a glass company, or I think they were making, because obviously they were making the actual enclosures for the whales, and they said they can't make like glass or perspex that thick. They have to be like massively thick, and then Scotty gives them the formula to make something. So in the future, they were obviously they were able to make some different and change the future that way. That, for me, I just think it's the way that the line's delivered. You know, it's literally like him looking, going, you know, primitive compared to where he is, because it, you know, looking at that, it looks like it'd be magic. I mean, can you imagine like sort of being even like 70, 80 years ago, and then living in that time there, and then coming into the modern world now, where, you know, I'm talking to you at opposite ends of the country. You know, in a couple of days' time, I'll be on a podcast talking to someone from the opposite side of the globe, you know, in real time. You know, it's just, you know, it beggars belief. So that in itself is really interesting.
True.
Soon we'll be all in VR.
So we'll be able to cuddle while we talk about Red Dwarf.
Yeah. Do it with a virtual headset. I can look to my right and see Mark. I can look to my left and see Carl, and it will all be there in the metaverse.
Sure. We could play as the Riviera Kid and Brett Riverboat and all those things, couldn't we?
You'll have to be the Riviera Kid.
Honestly, I keep talking about Gunman of the Apocalypse. I shouldn't. We're
almost there. We're almost there.
We are.
Puncher Kit on standby, like I said. Lister mentions about his appendix, by the way, about just having a Bangalore belly, which is a bit of alliteration there. We get Legion talking about various different things during the course of this, and we actually, obviously, as I said, you know, Rimmer gets his hard light drive, and we get to find out he can experience pleasure and pain, like I said. Crichton's side scan identifies the fact that it's part living tissue, part mechanical, and then we get Rimmer trying to recruit him.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff that comes out of this is from Rimmer is absolutely classic gold, isn't it?
I think giving Rimmer the hard light drive was a deliberate choice, because pretty much the next gag is Rimmer getting covered in shit. And I feel like if they hadn't done that, then what was the point of the hard light drive? The whole point is to continuously humiliate Rimmer. And maybe this was what they always intended to do eventually, was find a way to get Rimmer covered in shit.
Yeah, and moving the story forward is like, at least they can do things with him now where they've struggled all 5 seasons. The first part of this, we talked about self-deprecation before. Rimmer's kind of like going, "No, we can bring him in. He can help us. He can do this. He can do that. We can use his intellect, use his genius, and all that." And then Liz is kind of like sort of, "Yeah, with our red light bulb," and it brings us right back down. You know, and I think the line Lister says, I actually really like the line. I don't think it's particularly that funny, which is, "Let's flag down a black cab and head for Real Street here."
Yeah. And
I actually really like that line. And he says about him not joining him. And even Rimmer's line, like going into the big black, which I've never thought a way of explaining space before, really indicates just how, you know, lonely and spacious that space is. We talked about 200 years last week. It just goes to like sort of really tell that Red Dwarf's universe is so small that and again, the whole alien thing, you know, is really interesting that we've again reduced the team down to just in Starbug, and you know they're going on an adventure like Carl said last week. At the end of the episode was like pushing to like go into a new set of adventures, and this feels very much like a continuation of that. It's like, let's bring this guy aboard with us and like sort of let's go and do these adventures. And I find that interesting that they would go down this route. That they'd use the Weather Girl again. That's come up twice in 2 weeks, which is a bit
doing the same thing,
like a thing.
Hitting the pointy stick on the Weather Girl.
What's that Weather Girl done to them?
Got them through some cold nights by the sound of it.
Weather Girls don't have pointy sticks anymore, so it's another dated gag, isn't it?
Yeah. Rimmer trying to be intelligent is just brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah.
Amazing to see. And the fact, as I say, les gens, he's basically, like he's done in previous episodes and previous series, he tries to like do what he believes may well impress somebody when it's like he's completely out of his depth. And that is a very Rimmer thing to do.
It's because of the character that his swing and a miss is always going to be the funniest.
Yeah.
And the humiliation of someone who is so utterly pompous is satisfying as well. And this is a classic Rimmer humiliation.
Yeah. I like the fact that Cat joins in with the pointy stick game, doesn't even get a look in anymore. I just like that he's trying to be, he is being supportive of Rimmer, but he's really underpinning what he's doing. He's undercutting him.
Yeah, and he even goes, it's straight after the line, he goes, marvellous. Which I only picked that up this time. I don't know why I've not really noticed that before. Again, the second light switch commentary of the episode. It's the light switch.
It's wonderful.
Wonderful, delivered perfectly. It's very much, in the transcript I've got, somebody actually likened it to the gazpacho soup. We've built Rimmer up to this level.
I like the second half of it probably more than the first half, where he was the light switch. It's like, and just Rimmer still pushes on with, I can't buy it then. It's like, not really, I need it to turn the lights on and off. That's my favourite bit of the gag, in that even Legion kind of drops the pretense of it a bit and just kind of like, I can't believe you said something so stupid.
I love it because it's the kind of thing that Rimmer would think in his own head. And obviously he's 1/4 Rimmer. Rimmer's always had his own head battering him. And it isn't something perhaps Legion would have done to any of the other three characters.
We then get into these scenes. There's a lot of slapsticky, situational scenes now with the chopsticks, giving Craig Charles something to hold and something to use. Doesn't normally go down very well, and apparently this didn't go down very well either. No. And it is in this make-up as well. There's some comedy in here, Carl. What did you make to this middle scene where they are still trying to impress? They're still trying to, get on Legion's side, but you've got this kind of observation comedy kind of thing. It's literally for viewing on the screen.
I liked it because it was the right combination of very basic special effects of something takes off that's blatantly on a string. And then you have got the bit where Cat's trying to get the food out of Rimmer's mouth, and it is CG that his cheek is pulling along. And it's just that thing of, it's cut, so you don't necessarily see things flying through the air for all of it. You just see the implication that it is flying, and then it lands on Rimmer. Yeah. And I think it's just good. It's an editing gag, but it's also a bit of physical comedy. And of course, it's funny that, like Mark says, as soon as Rimmer's got a physical presence, he gets covered in absolutely everything.
I was howling, absolutely howling at this scene. I'm a massive fan of slapstick. Slapstick works for me. It's why I really, really enjoy Bottom.
Yeah.
As another TV show that has a huge amount of slapstick in.
I'm glad you clarified that, because as a statement, that's...
I also do quite it. Moving on.
If they push Bottom in close enough together, you'll get a lovely peach. So
a juicy giant peach.
James and the Juicy Giant Peach is probably a film that...
Don't make me laugh. A gag from the last episode.
I do like the fact that the cat is the one who kind of masters it better than most people. He just can't land it. Even Crichton, who looks super smooth about the idea of using them, can't actually do it properly.
No, but the telekinetic wine going in Lister's face, I was howling with. I actually paused the fucking thing because I was laughing too much. Like, I can't pause when we're talking like Juicy Giant Peach chat last week. I was crying and howling with laughter, even though I knew what was coming, even though I've seen it 100 times. But Lister and the telekinetic wine, just wonderful.
You get the feeling as well that they told Craig Charles it's going to come out this powerful, and then they turned to whoever it was and went, and add about 10 onto that. And
let's just get him.
Yeah, it'll be funny. So,
it felt like Chris Barry had his time last series. This series, we're going to have a little play around with Craig Charles. We're going to let him have the girl. But we're going to do this. This week, we're going to put liquid into his face, but at 10 times the power. It just feels like they're just starting to play with him a little bit. I mean, some of these scenes as well, actually, in the design of it, they actually reverse some of the footage. I mean, that obviously liquid.
Yeah, of course.
Stuff going
so Crichton
into
would
the
have
mouth.
spit the wine, wouldn't he? Yeah.
Where if it was stuff like when they were trying to get the food into the mouth, because obviously if you're trying to do it that way, as in forwards, you've got to try and do what they were doing when they were trying to get hold of it. Whereas if it's in the mouth and it comes out, then reversing it would be when it does eventually go in.
Fair play to Robert Llewellyn. That's a steady arc of him spitting that wine into that glass. It's not. It's
in the makeup as well.
I mean, wouldn't it be great if you could have that kind of drink, though? The fact you can just think about what you want to drink. And what would it be?
Cherry Coke. Every time.
White Monster.
What you mean, like that?
Yeah. We are recording quite late, and during this, I've been drinking...
It is just for people's reference, it is 18 minutes past midnight that we're currently recording this.
Yeah, I've been drinking a decaf cup of tea and a water, and during all of this, Kurt's chugging a Monster. It's like, oof, all right, yeah.
I need to get through somehow.
Yeah.
I need to get through somehow. Yeah, well, at the moment, mine would definitely be Monster.
Well, this is the thing. I'm assuming that the taste would be Cherry Coke, but it wouldn't be pure sugar. And
It's a blast from the past, so it'd be like Tab then.
well, no, Tab was bloody awful as well.
I know it was awful. I'm just saying it was that clear liquid stuff, but
I'm assuming that the telekinetic wine would be nutritious and good for you and not full of sugar like Cherry Coke is, but it would taste like Cherry Coke.
That'd be...
Okay, well, the fuck out of that.
If it was that, then it would be Vimto for me.
I like Vimto too. I do.
And then cheeky Vimto would be even better if that had the effects.
What do you want it to be? Jägermeister.
Yeah.
For our American friends, a Vimto is a cordial drink that you can only get in this country. A cheeky Vimto is a mix of an alcopop and port, which again you can only really get in this country. It tastes like Vimto. That's a very British reference, Kurt.
A very British and a very 90s reference as well. Or early 2000s.
I drank a lot of cheeky Vimtos at university.
Enough of this. I do have a really important question to ask you. So we find out is it the 32nd psychopath that they've come across? I think they actually do say, don't they? 32, because he has a long speech about...
And then it says 33, doesn't it?
Yeah, in our travels, we have met precisely 31 individuals, 3-1, and we have never felt moved to invite a single one to join our crew. True, most of them wanted to some way suck out our brains or erase us from history altogether, which is a great line. And it's just again, these longer jokes that kind of come back after, a bit that says like 32. But my question is, so you get a lot of this, it's kind of like the Plato's Cave thing. So the Plato's Cave, basically, for those people who don't know that, is you've got the world above you, and you below in the underground, you've got some peasants in like sort of the deepest darkness of the cave. They can't see what's above them. There's light shining on, and puppets are being shone onto the walls. So they believe that that's reality. So the peasants in the Plato's Cave looking at this wall, believing these things they can see on the wall are reality. They have no idea what's going on above ground, effectively. So it's the Matrix, basically. A lot of films use it. Truman Show, Matrix, that kind of thing, where Jim Carrey eventually finds out there's a world outside which he wasn't privy to. That's the idea of Plato's Cave. And the question, it's not quite that here, but it's still that kind of thing of like the Matrix. People are actually in the Matrix, don't know they're in the Matrix, and then when they realize it, they want to escape. But likes of Cypher in the Matrix, where he decides he wants to go back to reality. Back to the Matrix reality, because it's actually, you can have the wine that we've just been talking about. He likes his steak, he likes whatever. And this is the question on this, right? So it's a question of freedom, isn't it? What they're basically asking in this episode is, do you want to have everything you want? You've got holodecks like Star Trek. You can go anywhere you want. You can do anything you need. You can have everything that you particularly want. Or do you want your freedom? And it's a really interesting conversation. They, without even second guessing themselves, just go, well, we need to get out of here. But you can imagine other people going, actually, we quite like this idea of this existence, can't you? So it's a really interesting story, which obviously they've got 25 minutes to deal with it, but it is an interesting discussion that you could have in another format.
Yeah, I mean, it almost shows that they have the Stockholm syndrome of being on the ship. Because even if they do get back to Red Dwarf, they're still floating in 3 million years into deep space with no real idea of how to get back.
It's the eternal hope thing, isn't it? You know what you want. This is cool, but it's not what you want. And maybe you won't go for the thing that would make you content if you think that there's something you can strive for to be happy.
It's interesting that they don't really push it too much. But the ideas that a lot of Red Dwarf we've talked about over the couple of years we've been doing this, it's some of the ideas in the show have so much more deeper discussion than you would normally think. Yeah. And when you think about Legion, when I watched it in 1993, I would not be thinking these things, But now looking back at it, looking at the concept and critically looking at this show, there is all these ideas that are built into the show, and something like that is really interesting. The contemplation of, like you say, the hope of getting somewhere. And a verse to like sort of the deal with the devil as well. That's kind of that aspect, isn't it? It's like, do you have do you save your soul to have this life kind of thing?
I don't know what I do really. That's the thing. It's like, for me, loneliness is a big thing. Yes, I'd be with like the same 3 people. I'd probably want to give it a try for a while and then form a plan. If I wanted to get out, I probably wouldn't stay if nobody else did. Because what's the point?
You'd be there with yourself.
Yeah.
We've had that discussion previously, haven't we?
He'd be there with himself, but himself is still Legion. Because
Could you still have sex with yourself?
But would Crichton, if you think about Crichton is Crichton, but Legion is still Legion in Crichton's body.
No.
He's not Crichton, he's still Legion. Yeah,
because he talks about how he feels about no longer having all of them there.
But when he turns into Crichton, he actually physically becomes Crichton, doesn't he?
He becomes an entity that has Crichton's program, but not. He's still an entity in himself. He's not Crichton.
Yeah, because he still remembers everything from the previous incarnation he had. But Crichton's his overwhelming desktop skin, for lack of a better term.
I definitely have sex with myself.
He just wants to go back to that.
But even that might get boring after a while.
I'm sure you'd find a way.
But Legion probably didn't. So Mark goes to Legion, and all 3 of us, including Pasha, and Pasha comes with us.
I wouldn't have sex with a Mark and Pasha hybrid. No, I would not.
No, well, I'm taking Pasha away. So Kurt and Carl go off. We go into the big black, like Rimmer says. That leaves you and Legion, but you are you. And Legion is Legion, but they will both be gay.
Yeah.
So they would, but it's 2 different personalities in a way.
So it'd be like it'd be like dating yourself, but with a slight bit of difference to make it not entirely. So it'd be like dating yourself from another dimension because there's a slight twist in personality there.
We'd probably just meet once a day to have sex, I think.
And how long do you think that would last before you get bored?
Quite a while.
We should do a special where we just get a psychologist to talk to Mark about this.
Yeah, do we need to that intervention soon?
No, you need to create a time machine for me.
The cyber park also is mentioned as part of this as well. The fact that you can go to any term period if you choose, and basically the holodeck. But as I say, that whole Plato's Cave thing I thought was really interesting. I thought a bit about that over the last couple of days. Rimmer's got some overstarched pajamas and nocturnal boxing gloves. Nocturnal boxing gloves. Are they glow-in-the-dark boxing gloves?
I'd never spotted, but you're right, nocturnal. I've no idea.
Isn't the whole point of him wearing boxing gloves in his sleep to stop him from masturbating?
Yeah.
I got nothing. I'd heard that term lots of times, but it's not registered as something with me that was weird. Now you've said it, I'm like, that's really weird.
Yeah, I did again. Same with you. I looked at it, went, hang on a second, nocturnal boxing gloves. And so yeah. Anyway, that's what I done. I like Lister's breakdown of the good psycho guide, so like the good pub guide kind of thing. I thought that was brilliant the way he broke that down. Accommodation, excellent. Food, first class. Resident nutter, courteous and considerate.
4.5 chain stores.
And again, the scene actually lasts a long time. But one thing I made in my notes about this is I would really like to watch Revenge of the Surfboarding Killer Bikini Vampire Girls.
I bet it exists.
And especially with the escape plan. The escape plan is just
rubbish.
Yeah.
One of my favorite bits of this is where Lister's done the speech. He goes, "You're right. Let's do this. Caviar nibbler. That's what books fizz. Let's get out of this hellhole." Yeah. So we hear what happens to Crichton when he goes in. We see Lister's and we hear about Rimmer's, but yeah, I don't remember what the cat's is.
No, I don't think there is one. Because he's got the sneakers in the ice box, which is faultless. Legion says about the cyber park. Legion then starts to fall asleep because everyone else is falling asleep. Lister's guitar, again, 2 episodes in, and we've got the guitar not being tuned. And this one as well, same thing, perfect tuning. We're all equally baffled, so Rimmer says impeccable. Crichton's is the filthy wall. Mud straight there and the mop and bucket and stuff. But yeah, we don't actually get Cat. No, don't get Cat at all.
Another thing I noticed in this scene, right, was Craig Charles is pretty supple.
Oh, the split-legged headbutt.
Yeah. That's really, so that's like a lot of yoga shit going down there, man.
Isn't it in, when is it when he does the 0G kick thing?
That's in Gunman of the
That
Apocalypse.
would be in the next episode, Gunman of the Apocalypse.
Yeah. So he does that, doesn't he, in his legs up here when he does that 0G kickball.
Yeah.
Yeah, true. 0G kickboxing.
Yeah. I was going to say either he's very supple or that was a one-off that happened by mistake and he's never done it again.
Potentially.
Yeah. I think it might be quite subtle myself, definitely. So yeah, so we do get the Revenge of the... Someone's going to have to say it because I can't.
Revenge of the Surfboarding Killer Bikini Vampire Girls.
We do get that, and the fact that Legion goes, "You really think that you could have got this done from blah blah blah." There's some, again, I talked about ADR a little bit last week. There's stuff like when Lister gets his head plonked on against the floor, and it goes dunk.
Almost ludicrous. It's almost too much, but it's not quite.
And well, yeah, and again, it kind of like you said, Mark, with the slapstick stuff, where Rimmer's banging his head against the wall and he's going backwards and forwards, and they keep hitting each
wonderful.
other.
I was just, again, it's just been pure slapstick that has made me laugh in this episode.
Yeah.
But trying to knock out Rimmer, I was just like, it's wonderful.
Yeah. But they've even got the Star Trek reference in that as well, saying the Ionian nerve grip. You know, they're basically the Spock thing. And again, going back to last week, Smegups is clearly in my head because he goes to use the blue vase and it smashes before he picks it up. Yeah. So there's stuff like that which kind of kicks in.
I like the line of "just stand still while I hit you."
It's like the easiest solution in the world. Well, Rimmer, can you just like dive in and get your light bee and just take it out? Simple. Which I thought was great. I thought it's a great stuff, that. And it also gives you a little bit of continuity for later in the shows, because then you know he can turn them off if he needs to. So then obviously Crichton becomes Crichton and Legion as such, and has to go to the, has to follow the instructions because he's following the programming. There's one thing I do want to mention. Right towards the end of it, when Legion actually starts to like stab his own hand just before the actual fight scenes. And then when he stabs the hand, everyone but Craig Charles is using the right hand. and Craig Charles is using the wrong hand. So
Is he?
yeah, I only noticed that in the last shot. I was like, oh no. Everyone's like, so even to the point where you see Lister shaking his hand like that. And it's like he's shaking the wrong hand. It should be that
and
one.
they didn't spot it.
And
Brilliant.
It is a fun, again, with that Boys from the Dwarf thing, the fun gag of that kind of tough talk doesn't scare us. Yes, it does.
Yeah, yes, it does. Yeah, I was coming to that. It's just the way that, yes, it does. Crichton's just like, yeah, whatever. Yeah. Which again, something that they'll play on in later seasons. Season 8 is Series 8, isn't it? Where he gets qualified as a woman. So
yes, he does
all that stuff, which is great. So that was fantastic. And then Crichton takes them back onto Starbug, and they get given the drive, and off they go. So that brings the episode to the end. Have I missed anything? Is there anything you want to mention before?
Just a couple of quick bits that I love performance-wise. But Danny John Jules getting knocked flying across the table, that shows he's got a very dance-orientated background, just the leap he does. I love Robert Llewellyn's delivery when he goes, Crichton knows, and he goes, I do. In that kind of like Legion believes that Crichton knows. I would just find it way funny if Crichton's got no idea what he's talking about. But he goes, oh, you suspect the truth. And I love some of the performances in that scene, because it's a long scene with them all in one room. And the performances in it are really good. Like, again, we talked about Chris Barry's fall in Sirens. Danny John Jules' fall, where he gets punched out, is just a straight tree
lay
fall.
Me out. Yeah. And so he said, do I have permission to lay you out, sir?
Yeah. It shows real sort of camaraderie in them. Even the fact that Rimmer knows he's got to get knocked out, but he's just very adverse to it.
I'm allergic to being hit.
I think there's a lot there the bit that when Legion says that after the others are knocked out, that going back to a state of non-existence feels like promotion after this. And
I think that joke is a really interesting one, because the thing I wanted to discuss before we wrapped it up was just how sad Legion's story actually is. If you take a step back, take the comedy out of it, and just look at the plot, he is desperate to survive.
Yeah.
And he can only survive by trapping people that he would, in an ideal world, make really happy. And I think there's an ethical discussion here. By leaving, are they actively killing someone? Because their action ends his life.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that, because even if they stayed, he would still not exist. But he's still the essence of him still exists, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He's not dying per se. He's just not got form.
Yeah, he's not.
That's an interesting take, because obviously, as a humanist, I don't believe in the souls. In my head, to some extent, this was a really quite significant ethical dilemma, that you're taking away this person's life, and the next in inverted commas Legion, would be a different person.
But he remembers it all. So it's a corporal. It's almost as if he's like the beam in Hollow Ship that comes and takes Rimmer away. He's just non-corporal, and he needs people there for him to turn corporal, because he must be able to have some presence.
He's been taken. He's almost like he's in purgatory, isn't he? In some ways,
he's a ghost
more than anything. I know that's not really a humanist thing, but he's in that purgatory. He's in that, like, he's not alive and he's not dead. He's kind of like, I'd hate to use it because I know the science is well behind it, but it's kind of like the cat in the box, isn't he? Basically, because he's not dead and he's not alive at the same time. It's only when actual sentient beings become in his framework that he actually becomes something. So he's just, it's a really interesting
But he could have had a longer life in that particular form had they stayed longer. And they're taking away his opportunity to die of, in inverted commas, what would be natural causes when they die.
Well, it's an odd one because
I'm being a bit devil's advocate here, I know, but it's a fascinating discussion to me.
I mean, he makes it clear in the end that he's happy to go back to nothingness. But it's that same thing of, to me, it's similar in that they could have stayed at the place, but they wouldn't have been happy. But if they stayed at the place, Legion would be made up of 4 people that he may not have stayed happy as. But in the same way, he'd be forcing them to live in a place where may not want to be. They're forcing him to live inadvertently. They're forcing him to live in a form which he might not want to be, because he's no longer made up of all these great thinkers anymore. He's made up of Rimmer and the cat and Crichton and Lister.
I think maybe to some extent that's possibly why you can get away with him calming down and not being so bothered and not...
Let's put a Star Trek spin on it then, because Spock would say the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the needs of the few outweigh the needs of the many, depending on where you lie with that. So the fact that you're taking away 4 people's lives to have one person is now the needs of the few. Is that like what they would do for Spock? Is the fact that the need to get Spock alive and to get him back outweighs all the potential danger for the rest of the people? Or is it the fact that you imprison 4 people just for you to exist?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, isn't it? How many times have I watched Legion? 20, 30, probably more than that. But it was only because we were doing this podcast that I actually kind of looked at it analytically like this in a real kind of sci-fi way. But I love that Red Dwarf does this.
Yeah, it's the same with that Plato's Cave thing, like I said before. It's, do you stay imprisoned and have a perfect life, or do you want to have that agency to move on? It's the same thing for what you're saying with Legion, is that, he has to have someone there to exist, to have that life. So, but yeah, it's that again, and to even to take it one step further from what you're saying, the fact that we can come at that in several different ways, and normally we'd be thinking about, a singular question that we can debate. This seems to open up 3 or 4, 5, 6 different questions.
Yeah. And it's, again, Red Dwarf has a history of doing this, taking quite high-level philosophical science fiction debates that you don't notice until you take a step back from the lols. Red Dwarf's great, isn't it?
And there's our first one of the season, first one of the series. Excellent.
It is, though.
There is one thing we need to talk about before the end, though. When we do get the drive, we have Crichton doing the run around to try and get them to believe it's going to work, which is perfect for Red Dwarf, isn't it? The fact that they have absolutely no faith in it whatsoever. It's not going to work. It's us, isn't it? That's not going to work. And Crichton gets them riled up. Says, "Do we believe? We believe." Yeah, and they switch on the star drive on, and it glows and spins, and it raises higher and higher, and the cables break off, and off it goes. Where it does work, doesn't it?
Yes. This is the thing, is that when it's like, nothing ever works for us, it's like, yeah, because you cock it up. It's not that the tech doesn't work. I know there was an alternative end for that, which is them kind of hanging from I think they're hanging from a gantry, and it's turned on, and the picture's turned on its side, but it looks terrible. So that's why they went with the huge jockeying great wind machine and them just running off camera. But it works really well.
Yeah, but that I was going to say that works really, really well. And there's some spectacular stunt work that they probably wouldn't be able to do in 2022. These are just the actors. They're not stunt guys. And Craig Charles and Danny John Jules do some pretty spectacular shit.
They do, yeah. So that brings the episode to the close. Any final thoughts before we talk about social medias?
I think it's good that it's continued. The high standard that's been set by Sirens is carrying on, and it's only going to get bigger as we go into what's regarded as the best episode of the entire series.
I wonder what that episode is.
I don't know, but I think Mark's quite excited for it.
I'm fond of it. I am. It's Gunman of the Apocalypse. That's
next week.
It is.
Unfortunately, Carl, you won't be there.
I won't.
So Carl, is Gunman of the Apocalypse your favourite of the run? Would you say, or
of this series? Yes. Yeah, Gunman of the Apocalypse.
Of the what about the entire run?
Oh, the entire run. I'm still a big fan of Terraform. And Back to Reality, I'm still a big fan of. And there's a couple of episodes that we are yet to review that I don't know if Mark's seen yet, so I won't spoil it, that I am big fans of.
Where can people find you online then, Carl, before we come and see you back here in Season 7?
Well, I'll be launching Tight Sweaters, my podcast about Revenge of the Surfboarding Killer Bikini Vampire Girls, exclusively on the We Made This Podcast network. And you can find out about that and everything else I'm up to at allmylinks.com/Mr. Carl.
Can't wait to listen to that. It's going to be amazing. You've got some stellar cast appearances.
I've managed to get them all in. Also, I've managed to find out who the screenwriter was, even though they took their name off it.
And Mark?
So I have quite a lot of podcast projects. I'm running 3 at the moment, as well as this. I do Geek Polymath, which is a podcast about me being a bit of a kind of geek who likes everything, chatting to someone who's really obsessed about a particular topic. I've got plans for Star Trek, for Marvel Comics, for RuPaul's Drag Race, and more on that. So keep your eye on that at Geek Polymath on Twitter. I run Right in the Childhood, where I have a guest every month who comes and talks to me about a kids' TV show that they watched as a kid. 9 times out of 10, I've never even fucking heard of it because I deliberately try and get people that aren't my age. That's at RITC Pod on Twitter. I am also one of the co-hosts of Chucky Vision, which is a podcast based on looking at everything to do with Chucky and Child's Play. We've done all the 7 films. We've done all of series 1 of Chucky, but we're now looking at weird ass shit. We've got plans to read like comics and watch other films with killer dolls in and stuff like that. If you're interested in that, it's at Chucky Vision. And also, I'm a regular host on Podcast 616, which is our network's podcast about the Marvel MCU and wider universe. At Podcast 616 on Twitter, I think.
You can find me on Twitter at rmuldrake, that's RMULDRAKE. Just recently announced we are going to be covering Yellow Jackets, which is a 10-episode series on Showtime. And it has a plane crash and has very kind of lost X-Files and Twin Peaks illusions and stuff like that. So we are covering that. You can find that at Yellow Jacket Pod, which just dropped the S from Yellow Jacket. So Yellow Jacket Pod, and that's called the No Book Club. So the people who know what that's about will know what that's about. You can also find me on the Star Trek Picard podcast, and that's Make It So, and you can find that at Jean-Luc Podard. So, and a multitude of other podcasts, as Mark alluded to last week. But yeah, you can find me at rmuldrake. That will give you an indication of what I'm doing where. Till next week, until when we talk about the Emmy Award-winning episode, Gunman of the Apocalypse, remember that everyone needs to know. Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast, was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North. You can find us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod, and we are part of the We Made This Podcast network, which can be found online
at wemadethispod.com or on Twitter at wemadethispod.
Hello everyone, this is Tony, Network Chief of We Made This. As you know, our podcast network brings together a brilliant assortment of talent who talk about all kinds of pop culture content, such as the episode you just listened to. We're not going anywhere, but we'd love to keep the lights on for even longer if you're able to support our network on Patreon. For just £2 a month, you get your name in lights and the satisfaction of knowing you're helping us produce more great audio. And for £3 a month, you'll get your name in lights, but you'll also get access to an exclusive bi-monthly podcast from the We Made This talent pool on podcasting, pop culture, and, well, you tell us. We'll take your suggestions. For less than the price of a coffee per month, you can help keep We Made This going. Just head to patreon.com/We Made This. That's patreon.com/We Made This. And get the ball rolling. Elsewhere on We Made This. The Failed Critics Podcast.
This Leatherface isn't a young guy anymore. He's a big guy. He's an older guy. Like, just sprint a little bit up the road and shoot him. Like, he's got a big chainsaw as well, that if he's swinging it around, he's got to be careful with it or he's going to hurt himself. He's not going to be quick. Literally, some of them have got guns at some point in this film. Just sprint 20 yards up the road and shoot him.
There's a number of plot holes in this where the Hardesty character has the opportunity to point blank him and just doesn't do it. And it's just like, you've gone all this way, you've waited 50 years to see him again, and you could literally just blow his head off.
Yeah.
He's not posing any threat to you whatsoever. In fact, he's sat on his bed waiting for you to do something.
And then you have a little chat with him. So just blow him away.
Free with this month's issue.
Quite often, things that go fast is good.
But that's not, because it doesn't go really fast.
Yeah, just goes faster.
Yeah, and also when you've been ominously stalking, which is what that baseline does. It's ominous. Then going fast is not. You know, like Jason Voorhees doesn't run, does he? No.
He doesn't need to.
He remains
just
ominous
appears
the whole time.
Yeah, but
that's what this song should have done.
He's not Jason Voorhees. He's the T-1000's brother.
And did the T-1000 run? Not really.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, a bit, but not
that
a
bit
lot.
when he's fucking chasing after them in the car, he's definitely running.
Maybe
quite
that's
famously.
why he did it. You know what?
Geek Polymath.
I don't think I'm a geek because I'm gay, but I think it fucking helped.
Well, listen, so I have theories about this.
Good.
Strap in for a conspiracy session.
Please.
It's all to do with being an outsider, which, of course, as fingers crossed, as society progresses and advances, we will hopefully get to the stage where just sexuality will have nothing to do with you being an insider or an outsider, but it's massively a part of it. There's a reason Russell T Davies felt such a strong connection to Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And I think those kind of outsider bubbles overlap.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.